Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Sobchak-Bankard, and I'm here with three wild robots whose tasks are not yet complete. First, he makes noise and makes simple tasks more complicated. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Small wings are teeth, the claws of the sky. Show me your teeth. I'm doing well, Jen. How are you?
I'm a little embarrassed I didn't predict that you were going to say that because it makes so much sense now. But otherwise, I'm great. Thanks. And please, whatever you do, don't ask him about the tree he's been chewing on. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
I'm a fox. I do foxy things. It's in my nature. Oh, sorry, Jen. Were we supposed to get quotes from the movie? I was just introducing myself.
You just wanted to share that.
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk about this really fun movie.
Yeah, so am I. And last but not least, he has a chance if where his wings end, his heart can pay the balance. It's Antonio Elefano. How are you doing, Antonio?
Proximity makes life burn all the brighter. I'm doing great. It is a fun movie. I'm excited.
I didn't see the accent coming. That was amazing.
That was supposed to be just a child. I don't know how he became British.
Your cast is Oliver Twist. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know we had Ben Winshaw on this week.
Oh my gosh!
It's so great that we've hit the big leagues.
So, poor listeners, those were all references to the film we are here to review today, Wild Robot, which is out in theaters now. And as far as I know, it's doing pretty well. The DreamWorks film adapts the first novel of a beloved trilogy by Peter Brown, and it is about a shipwrecked robot who must learn to survive on a harsh forest island. So if you're listening to us for the first time, we will have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film. That's usually about the first 20, 30 minutes, depending on how much we have to say. And then with a very clear alert, we will shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. PT, if listeners are satisfied with our service after listening to this episode, what can they do?
If it fits in with their programming, they could follow the Long Take Review wherever they get their podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, really wherever you can get podcasts. You can find us there and you can subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review. And on Letterboxd, the account is at LTRpod. And the hashtag you can search for is hashtag LTRpod to see each of the things we have all been watching. Jen?
Thanks, BTV. So we are just about ready to get into our discussion of The Wild Robot. But first, we wanted to check in. If you had listened to our last episode, we made a sort of last minute plea to try to recruit folks to our mini league for Vulture's movie fantasy league, which is basically like a fantasy draft of movies for the year. And you get points for different things based on how well your movie does in different categories. And we formed a mini league, but we are one person short of being eligible to receive prizes depending on how well we do. You need 10 people in a mini league, apparently. So we really need one more person. If you are already registered, so unfortunately the registration in general has closed, but if you already registered but you aren't attached to another group of people, we welcome you. Please join us. We are way overconfident, I think, in terms of our picks. And that's the other reason I wanted to bring it up now, is because we wanted to share our picks.
And it is until October 14th. So if you are already in the league, if you've already signed up to play the movie fantasy league at Vulture, but you don't have a mini league or you don't care about your mini league and you care about us a little bit more, you can check the first email that came from Joe Reed, which was on Tuesday, October 8th. And that has instructions for what to do. You have to email them to switch into our league. Our league is The Long Take Review with spaces between each word. And we would welcome you, and it would be great if we could be eligible for prizes. If it doesn't happen, that's okay. We have a healthy sense of competition amongst each other.
That's fair. So I guess what was everybody's strategy going into this? Like, what ended up determining your picks?
I think I started with what I thought would be like the big ticket items first. And then once I decided which ones I couldn't live without, then I had to start going cheap, like which ones where I could get, some movies on the list that I could get for better value, and then it was just filling out from there. So I think I started from most expensive, went to the least expensive, and then I went to the middle to fill out the rest. How about the rest of you?
I roughly use that same strategy. I will just say, when we get to Oscar picks, Jen always brings up the dichotomy of the head and the heart. And I will say I went with more heart this time around. I was like, this is fun. It could be fun to strategize, but I really went with the movies I have, mostly movies I'm anticipating, but a few that I had seen and enjoyed. Like Antonio said, when we got down to you got a couple bucks left, it was like, well, yeah, that one was fine. I'll take that. But I maybe tried to get 3 of my 4 hype draft picks. I'll let you guess which one I left out.
Yeah, I had a similar, I sort of clustered the expensive movies because those are also, they were the first on the list. The list was organized from most expensive to least, and it was like, ooh, what are the expensive ones I would like? And then quickly realized I was at like $130 after like 5 movies. But just making the list, my long list. But then I got really excited about some of the cheap movies, as well as the mid-tier ones. So then it was sort of playing around with, well, how do I want to balance this out? And I will say this, this is movies fantasy league in my mind. Like, I have spent the most amount of time playing fantasy baseball as the comparison. And I have sort of had a similar draft strategy here as I do when I play fantasy baseball, which is like usually looking at 1 or 2 categories and being like, I don't care. I never care about steals and I never care about saves in fantasy baseball. I also never win fantasy baseball. So this is not a good strategy. But I basically punted box office. I was just sort of like, you know what, whatever. I'm not going to take a movie just because it's going to be a box office. And I instead pivoted to what are movies, again, like Antonio and Greg were saying, that I liked and I wanted to keep around that I think might pick up a lot of critics awards, as well as potentially get Oscar nominations. And I went half and half, movies that I've seen and movies I haven't. And the ones that I've seen, I picked ones that have high critical scores locked in to sort of be like, well, that's points banked. Like, that's points already, unless there's a massive amount of new reviews that bring it down. Like, I got, a lot of ones in the 90s in the Rotten Tomatoes score to lock up some of those points. So Jen, what about you?
That's smart. I didn't do that. So my strategy mainly was which one of these movies that's not too expensive is most likely to be in the Best Picture 10. And then I figured, because usually if something's in Best Picture, it's also nominated for a bunch of other things. It's also won a bunch of other critics awards. And I really felt like to get the most value, I actually mostly picked movies I have not seen. In fact, now that I'm looking at this list again, I have only seen 1 movie out of the 8 that I picked.
Oh, wow.
So actually, should we just I'll start listing them and then we can
do
kind
it.
of react and then everyone can take a turn. So I have The Brutalist, which I think is low key the front runner, but no one wants to say it's the front runner right now. I think because they're afraid that it's not going to be the front runner later if they do that. And then A Real Pain, which is the only movie I've seen, and I think is really that kind of sleeper. I think it's gonna get that small movie spot in the Best Picture 10. And then Conclave, which is like a crowd pleaser. So even if it doesn't get a lot of awards traction, it's, I think, going to probably do pretty well at the box office, or better than people think it will. And also just, it's very Oscar baity. I have The Substance, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, The Piano Lesson, September 5th, and Honora. So Honora is was the other most expensive movie I think I had, because it has done so well and is such a critical favorite already. But I tried to pick ones that I think are sleepers. Like September 5th is a movie that I feel like only just got distribution, but it is about the Munich Olympics and the news coverage of a hostage situation there. And it has, I want to say, Peter Skarsgård. There's a Skarsgård in it. And people who have seen this movie think it's really good. But I don't know why no one really is talking about it in an awards context, because it sounds exactly like the type of movie the Academy would love. Because it's kind of like a process movie. It's like a thriller. It has historical significance. I don't know.
I mean, the history of Israel and Palestine, very chill and normal topic that everyone's going to be excited to go see at the theater. They want to explore it more.
So I actually think that that will push it into the kind of Oscar spotlight, because the Academy will be like, oh, this is a politically significant movie, even if it's not directly about the current conflict. You know what I mean? Like, I think people will latch onto it in that way, for
I think
better or
that
for
makes
worse.
sense. I had it on my long list because I had a similar thought of like any of those, I mean, it's TV news, but it's still sort of showbiz, like it's the industry, and that does always have some appeals there.
Yeah,
So
I'm hearing a lot of comparisons to Spotlight.
I mean, that's a good
So
comparison.
yeah.
Well, I will just note, because we were, saying great list. We were saying like there was a little like, oh, maybe we'll have a lot of overlap. I only have 2 of the same movies as you.
Whoa.
So there is, I think, a lot of divergent. So the 2 that I have similar are 2 of the big ticket ones, Honora and The Brutalist. But both of those might be peaking early, and maybe that it's a lot of critics hype, and they're going to sort of fizzle out. These are also the 2 that I was like, maybe this is the only space where I think I might get some box office points. Is like, what if like Honora sort of takes off and doesn't have to make a ton of money, but what if it makes like $70 million or even gets to like $100 million if it becomes this thing that everyone really likes and responds to. And I mean, The Brutalist will only have like 2 screenings a day because it's so long. But there's a lot of sort of momentum there. It feels like the kind of movie that could, sort of like the big 3 last year of Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Killers of the Flower Moon, just rack up a bunch of below the line nominations, even whether or not it actually gets to the point of winning stuff. It might get a lot of things there, plus critics awards along the way to do that. I also, in terms of big ticket, I did do the splurge, sacrificing box office, and I got Dune Part 2
Wow.
for similar thinking of give me all those noms, give me all those critics awards. And it's at like whatever it is, like 91, 92 on Rotten Tomatoes. So it was very well reviewed, has that sort of locked in. I don't think that's changing because I think everyone's reviewed it already. So those are my 3 big ones. I had a couple others that I was thinking about kind of moving in and out on that. But then going down, I'm going to go down the cost list because that's the way I was thinking about it. I had 2 $8 movies. The one that I had seen that, again, I'm kind of banking on some critics awards and maybe sneaking in for some Oscar nominations, but I really think it's going to win. I get some stuff at a lot of critics, like local critics level things that contribute points to this, is Dee Dee, one of our favorites. That was a nice $8 movie. And then
now on Peacock and available to stream if people missed it. So it's very accessible all of a sudden.
It's accessible on streaming. It's accessible in your heart because it's a very enjoyable movie. And then not accessible yet because it has not been released. But on, I believe, Antonio's Hype Draft board, I took Hard Truths, the Mike Leigh movie, because I do feel like between actress and screenplay, that's got some real potential there. Maybe it's going to be too harsh. I don't know. But I had that at $8. At $5, really more for the critics group. I don't think it's going to get to the Oscars, unfortunately. I did take my Hype Draft pick. I saw the TV Glow. I think that's going to be one of those ones at the end of the year that the more sort of forward-thinking critics are going to be like, this movie was so good, we need to pay attention to this. And I think a lot of those local city group critics will be giving it a few awards to get some attention out there. And then my last 2, I had a $3 pick and a $1 pick. My $3 one I have not seen, but I've only heard good things about, and that's Daughters, the documentary that came out of Sundance that's about a prison-related issues. I couldn't fit Sing Sing in because that was expensive. So I was like, well, Daughters. And like there are some like sort of like high-profile documentaries that are around that might carry forward and do really well. But I really feel like this has a chance for a nomination and potentially could get that issue kind of momentum in the documentary. And then for $1, My Beloved Kneecap, potential Best International Film nominee. If there was real justice in the world, a potential original song as well. There is an original song in the movie. So that would be lovely. And I think some critics prizes might get picked up along the way. So we'll see. I kind of feel like I'm kind of nickel and diming points from smaller things instead of making too many big swings at the Oscars outside of those top 3 of Dune Part 2, Honora, and The Brutalist. But that was my strategy. We'll see how it works.
All right. So I actually don't have a ton of overlap either. I have a Nora. So I'm curious if Greg, if all four of us went for it. I have a Nora, but my entire list is stuff I haven't seen. So the Lord of the Rings, the War of the Rohirrim, that's on my
Oh,
list.
That was PT's hype draft.
Yep, I'm plucking from all your hype drafts. Nosferatu, also my list. Yeah, Mega. No, Conclave. Wicked. So I decided to go for box office. I think it's going to do well in
Yeah,
the
that's
box
smart.
office. A Complete Unknown. I figure at least one nomination. Um, and then I for box office entirely for box office. My last two, and I love these two together: Heretic and The Best Christmas Pageant Ever.
Wow.
I love that you had the best Christmas pageant ever and was also like, we probably all have the same movies.
Wow, I didn't see that coming. That's great. That's really heavily relying on potential box office. That's really impressive.
I will just say the last couple times I've seen the Wicked trailer, so at Beetlejuice and at Wild Robot, the room was really into it. I think that will be a hit, like you're saying, in ways that critics aren't ready to appreciate, unless the general public hears it's only part one, and then they'll cop out and wait. But I think those are good picks. All right. Wait, sorry. Those are all terrible picks, and you three are stupid. Haha, sports banter. All right. So I think I have mostly things I haven't heard. There's one on my list that I really haven't heard any of you say yet, which surprises me. And it is, of course, my hype draft pick, the Nickel Boys, which I understand it's cooled a little bit. Apparently, its format is going to throw some people off, but I remain high on Nickel Boys stock, and I think that will pay off for me, and you all will be crying. Haha, sports banter. Also, filling out I was looking at my list just now, and I was like, wow, this is really definitely like that specific Thursday night at 7:00. I just went with my heart at that moment, or whatever time it was. So my big spend was Anora as well. So that is 4 for 4. I started my Sean Baker watch because I'd never watched any of his movies, and I think when I finished the Florida Project, I was like, give him all the Oscars. This is an incredible movie, and it's so good. And if Anora can like capture just a little of that energy and style, it's going to be just incredible. So I'm big on the Anora camp. I will also say, if people have been paying attention like I have, they changed the trailers and the poster so that it's now Mikey Madsen is Anora everywhere. So I think that to me is signaling they're really getting behind her. And that to me is striking because she's not a household name. No disrespect intended, but like I think I would call this a breakout role. I know I really liked her on the Pam Adlon show, and she did, had a kind of burst onto the screen on fire appearance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But right, that was her. Yeah,
yes, it was.
But I am excited to see that performance. So. Then I can't remember the exact order, but I will say I took Conclave as well. I'm really excited about Conclave. Co-hosts know that I should be at a Conclave screening right now, but didn't get word soon enough. So I am here with my 3 favorite popes instead of a group of cardinals. But I'm really excited for that movie, and I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I join Antonio on A Complete Unknown based purely on the strength of the trailers, which are pretty great. I think Chalamet is a shoo-in for a nomination. And, I got to give my loyalty to James Mangold because he's the director of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And so I don't need up the rest of the podcast. I went with my 2 other hype draft picks. Monkey Man was super cheap. And like everything's set on Monkey Man. So it was just like blind loyalty. I got $1 left. I'm grabbing it. Why not? And I don't think it'll help my score at all. I had also just watched His Three Daughters, which I know you all enjoyed, and I was blown away by. So I grabbed that, which I think there's some awards buzz potential there. I grabbed Twisters, and then before I had seen it, just to clarify, even though we are now after I've seen it, I also grabbed Saturday Night. So I'm feeling pretty confident with my slate, notably missing Megalopolis to my advantage. And I'm going to reclaim my glory that I lost by losing the hype draft because I picked Megalopolis.
I will say, I think A Complete Unknown's a really good pick. I was moving around my pieces before I just went in for Dune Part 2, and it was A Complete Unknown and a movie that apparently none of us took, Emilia Perez, were sort of those two slots plus The Brutalist. And then I was trying to figure out, can I get a Nora? Like, how many $1 movies can I get to offset all of this? And yeah, I think those were particularly smart. And then I had Conclave and The Piano Lesson also as kind of expensive ones that I had on my list. That's like I can't fit it. So I'm glad we have Conclave representation here.
I just want to give a shout out to the other 4 people in our mini league. Because I'm just looking at, as everyone's talking, I was looking at their lists as well, and they have really good picks. So, Zen Kenobi, who's a friend of the show, also picked Kneecap.
Hell yeah, he did.
So he's with you, PT.
Yeah,
and
he wouldn't go see it with me. Boo to you, sir. I had to go by myself. You could have come and seen it with me. Go ahead.
But he had Emilia Perez. So, and A Complete Unknown, Nosferatu. I saw the TV Glow. Love Lies Bleeding. That's some loyalty because that's been out for a long time. A movie called Resball, which I actually have no idea what that is, and Gladiator 2, which was the expensive pick. I think
it's about a basketball league on a reservation, a Native American reservation. I think it's a documentary. I think is either LeBron, someone famous is involved in that, like Steph Curry, a famous basketball player. So that could get some momentum gathering for sure.
And then Marigold, who I actually don't know who this is, but picked Nickel Boys, right? So it's got Greg's hype pick. My Old Ass, which is the movie that just came out.
Good.
With
people should
Plaza.
see that. That's excellent. Yeah, go see that, you 3.
Moana 2, which that's a confident pick. But box office probably for that, regardless of how good it is, will be big. Yeah. Here, which is the Robert Zemeckis, Tom Hanks. We live through time, but with Tom Hanks.
Time and time is yours, and in you is capture.
Strong yes song.
Is Robin Wright is the female lead?
Jenny.
Okay, yeah.
It's the Jenny and Forrest reunion.
Oh, that's right. And then Heretic, Wicked, His Three Daughters, and Juror Number 2, which we haven't talked but is the Clint Eastwood movie that's premiering at AFI Fest, which is coming up soon. That's like the last film festival sort of got goalpost before we really get into the thick of sort of nomination season. So, and there's been a lot of good buzz. People are pretty excited about that movie. I guess the trailer, which I haven't watched yet, looked really good. So
betting on Clint's a good idea. Like he does come in with these movies and gets a few nominations, and people like to pay attention. So yeah, that's smart. And then I don't know about Wicked, Antonio. I'm really sorry. Unlike Greg, every time I've seen the Wicked trailer, and maybe this is jaded downtown LA audiences instead of suburban North Shore people, but everyone is just groaning and doesn't like it. And so I don't know.
I'm here for it.
Apparently, yeah. And we got multiple slots across our league.
We also have. Yeah, I mean, I think there are enough so I haven't really said much about it because I'm very excited for it, but it's because I love the Broadway show. And so that has nothing to do with how good or bad I think the movie's going to be. And so I think the box office for that, at least opening weekend, is probably going to be pretty strong for that reason. Like, people are just going to go see it because it's Wicked, right? And then depending on how good it is after that, we'll see how it goes.
It could rise to the box office success of West Side Story and In the Heights. So I get it.
This anti-musical stance, I don't know. I can't decide it.
This is league jockeying, Jen. This is nothing about musicals.
Haha, sports banter.
Yes.
Hey. Well, I was just gonna say, the math I'm doing on Wicked is all the families that sat watching the Olympics this summer and saw constant ads, I think mentally bookmarked and said, "That's our family Thanksgiving movie," right? When you get the adult kids and the parents and everybody, I think it's gonna be strong. I think that will get those families, not Moana 2, would be my guess at this vantage point. I mean, it was incredible how Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande would be like at swimming, and then they'd cut to like equestrian, and they would somehow be there already, just watching in the crowd, and then they'd cut to the surfing, which was in Tahiti, and they were there too. I don't know how they did it. So some kind of magic.
Yeah.
They are witches.
Broom based.
So someone in our mini league named 96 Hour Napoleon Cut, who clearly is a listener of the show, we support this name. Shout out to whoever this is. Has Honora Blitz, which I feel bad is my own hype draft pick, and I didn't pick it for this. Partly because it seems like critical reception of it has cooled a little bit, but I don't know. That could be a sleeper as well. The Complete Unknown, The Brutalist, Heretic. A lot of love for Heretic on here. Craven the Hunter, which honestly an inspired pick. The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which I didn't talk about when I did my list, but this is the one that I think will cross over from International Feature to Best Picture, because apparently it's really great. People really like it. And it has a really strong narrative of the director had to flee Iran, and the whole behind the scenes story about how this film got made, I think will be very powerful for Oscar voters. And then Baby Girl, which we also haven't really talked about in this show, but I saw the trailer for this. It looks really fun. And it's like framed as a Christmas movie, which I think is hilarious. Like the trailer makes it sound like it's a Christmas movie. So yeah, I don't know. I think that I don't really buy the Nicole Kidman Best Actress buzz necessarily, because I just think the Academy won't be that cool, but we'll see.
Not even for a nomination?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm skeptical. I mean, it's possible. It's possible.
I think it's a great choice because that nomination is not locked in or anything, but is like, it's Nicole Kidman. Like,
right? Who says no?
Who would be surprised?
Yeah,
Jen,
sure.
I guess. But
well, I just feel like people are gonna gonna be squeamish about the movie because of the sexual content, and then not be cool about it, right? That's my theory. But anyway, we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. Sarah Hastings, friend of the show, chose Nosferatu. So yeah, everyone chose Nosferatu except for me. Maxine, which I love the loyalty to horror. Wicked, Queer, Long Legs, Night Bitch, Hitman, and Doom Part 2. This is an excellent list.
Yeah. I think that might be the best marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wicked, Queer, Long Legs, and Night Bitch, all things I was called on the playground growing up. So there we go. Very fun list. Horror. I am shocked how well horror theaters are filling still when I go to a horror movie. And I believe Longlegs just crossed the $1 million logs on Letterboxd, which is very fast for Parasite was faster and some other huge movies. But for a movie that size, that was pretty incredible.
And last but not least, because I don't want to go through this and leave off one person, that seems rude. Even though I know we're going long on this, much longer than I thought we would. These aren't the movies you're looking for, which is clearly one of our Star Wars friends, but I don't know who. Pick Nosferatu, Baby Girl, Moana 2, The Outrun, which that's, Saoirse Ronan is getting a nomination for something this year, and it's probably The Outrun. Woman of the Hour, Anna Kendrick's directorial debut. It's a Netflix movie about the dating game with a serial killer. I'm in. That sounds great. And then September 5th, The Brutalist and Conclave. So actually, this one might have the most overlap with my list.
Yeah.
So thank you for all those folks who are joining us.
Great picks.
In this madness. Yeah, great picks. That you did us proud. So again, if you want to be the 10th person on our roster and you've already registered for the Vulture Movies Fantasy League, just go to the email that you got. It has an email address. Just email them saying, I want to join the Long Take Review Mini League.
And if you signed up and you're one of the names that we couldn't recognize, and you want to let us know, please do, so we know who's in the league with us, and we can more direct our trash talk in future times that we're
Right,
looking
at
at
you.
the progress of the league.
I will add this live on air without consulting anybody. I think if one of our listener wins, they get to pick a movie and come on and be our guest for a
I love
recording.
I love it.
Like, that's
Yes,
easy.
of
It
course.
costs us nothing. We'd love to have somebody new on. So let's do it.
Yeah, I love it. And yeah, Vulture apparently really good at protecting your privacy, but that's not good for us because we don't know who you are. So, all right, we've waited long enough. Sorry, I knew I had a feeling. I was like, we're gonna get overexcited about this and take too long, but that's fine. What was everybody's short take about the Wild Robot?
Thought this was really charming. It was a movie where I sort of settled in at the beginning and was kind of thrilled that it was a movie I'd never seen before and a premise that just seemed like irresistible. I thought the premise was mined really movingly with characters I really enjoyed spending time with. And during a time when any story about AI pretends the apocalypse, I really loved something coming out the opposite way. What about you all?
Nice.
Well, I like that, Antonio. This was really great, and I liked it a lot. I don't think I was being too cynical when I actually felt a little opposite in the beginning with Antonio, where I was kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. This is what if instead of finding Wally, Eve lands and finds a bunch of wild animals, but she's also Mr. Meeseeks from Rick and Morty, and like cannot like turn away from completing a task. But as the sort of pieces of the narrative and the trajectory of the relationships between the characters start to come together, it was one of those things where it's just like every time you're like, I get it. I've unlocked what's going to happen now in this rest of this movie. Like there was always some extra turns and twists and additions that didn't feel out of left field or anything, but were just strong storytelling progressions that kept me moving along and had me and the other 8 people at a 10:30 p.m. showing of this movie, like just quietly weeping as it wrapped up.
I will stick with Antonio's word of charming. I think it's very hard to dislike this movie, to actively dislike it. But I'm gonna be honest, even if I'm the grumpy one in the room, and say the superlative praise this has gotten. I walked in having heard like it'll be nominated for Best Picture. It's that good. I'm not so sure about that level of praise. Do I watch a lot of really bad kids movies? I do. Was this one of them? Absolutely not. It is head and shoulders above average. I would just be a little cautious about the narratives that place this, so far beyond what Pixar has ever achieved. What no man has achieved since pen touched paper. No, it's a good movie, but it's not quite there. Jen, knowing what I know about you, I'm sure you hated the adorable animals talking to a robot.
Oh, this movie was coming for me from the get-go. Yeah, for sure. So unsurprisingly, I loved this movie. It made me really happy. I cried, I laughed. It was adorable. I had actually read the book beforehand. I read it with my kids over the summer, partly because I knew this movie was coming, but I also had actually before then heard from several friends who have kids that this was a really good book series for like slightly older kids, like not like little kids, but my daughter's 7 and was really into it and really loved the movie. She also cried a lot. She's a sensitive soul and understands things beyond her age, oftentimes, and therefore gets really upset about stuff. So I agree that the hype for this is getting a little bit overblown. And I think that's largely because we have been living in sequel land with animation for so long, right? The other biggest animated movie this year was Inside Out 2, which was great. And you can go listen to our episode on it. We really liked it. But at the same time, I think anything remotely feeling fresh and original was going to blow people away at this point with animation. And especially from DreamWorks. I think that's the other factor is that people expect How to Train Your Dragon, which I love from DreamWorks. They expect at its best, and they expect at its worst, like the Croods. So I think that this kind of like exceeded a lot of people's expectations, and I think that's where the big critical hype is coming from. That said, I would say that the animation and style in this is absolutely stunning. the storytelling, while very streamlined and pretty simple, that's the thing people have to keep in mind, I think, is that it's adapted from a book that's intended for children. Like, it's a novel, but it is for children. And because of that, the story, the plot does not get particularly complex and actually is very condensed and streamlined compared to the book. But at the same time, I think it hits all the emotional beats it needs to. I think it's actually, there's something quite beautiful in its simplicity. And yeah, I don't actually have many notes for this movie, other beyond sort of like choices in adaptation that I kind of was like, oh, like I wish they had, given the beaver more screen time. But we can get into that in spoiler mode. So I kind of jumped the gun on recommendation algorithm, in which we establish the audience of a film. We acknowledge that not every film is for everyone, but did you feel as though, because I think some of the best animated movies hits for adults and kids in a sort of balance, right? How would you recommend this to many adults, or adults in particular that don't have kids?
I'll take that one. I think I would, because the found family dynamic of what is unfolding here. Not that that's a common theme in a lot of different stories, but even if you are not necessarily a parent to a child, that idea of finding a new community and building through these individual relationships, I think is really poignant. I do think, to Greg's point about the hype, which I will confess didn't bother me because I had sort of forgotten how hyped this was, and I'm happy for that, because I think if I had gone in being like, oh right, this was like maybe the people thought this was gonna win the audience award at Toronto for a little while, and like, yeah, this was going to rampage out of animation into other categories. This will be a screenplay nominee, et cetera, et cetera. That, like, that's probably hyping it too much. I don't know if this is a movie that someone who doesn't care for animation, this isn't the movie that's going to win them over into like, but you should see this, in a way that, say, I think like maybe a Miyazaki movie could do that, and some of the best Pixar movies could do that. So I would say it's not quite at that tier, but if you are a childless adult, just like lounging in money because you don't have to spend it on your offspring, I think that you can splash a little money to go see this. If it's something that you have any like inkling of an interest, I think it's going to win you over.
I'll say my screening was mostly families, but there were a few like adult couples without kids who were there who are having a perfectly wonderful time. And to me, the mark of like a great like kids movie is one that works in two layers, right? One that where the kids story, the kids enjoy it, and they understand their story, and I feel like I'm watching a slightly different movie and enjoying it for slightly different reasons. And that happened, I think, for me it happened in this movie. Greg, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, not a problem at all. I think I also like that, and I often feel pandered to this probably shows my age exactly, but like for me, Aladdin from Disney was the first one where it was like, we're gonna have the genie really talk to the parents. And there's often those two layers. It's like kind of the simple narrative, but then the like snarky commentary on it that only parents get the jokes. I remember the genie says something like, I like you, buddy, but I don't want to pick out curtains. And I remember my parents like falling out of their chairs laughing. And I was like, what is happening? Why is that a joke? Because I was, just on the other side of that line. Um, I don't, my problem with really saying that people should childless adults. I mean, JD Vance is freaking out. I mean, he just locked in on PT as a target because of all your admissions. But I think what makes me hesitate is it feels just a little bit too. I know what parents like, thinking about nostalgia for their little babies, and it just leans a little too far into that dynamic for me to say, like, yeah, you'll all enjoy it. I think those are emotions everybody has access to. It's not a foreign concept, but it just does seem so in tune to like, we're gonna make the moms weep, we're gonna make the dads weep, and I don't know that makes for like a fun time. So if you are an animation fan, I think absolutely. Particularly if you really liked the style of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I think that's the one this has the most in common with, which is the same studio. Yes, yes.
Correct.
So that's the one I'd say. If that one worked for you and kind of hit the feels in the right place, I'd go for this one.
Yeah, and I think before we go to spoiler mode, the last thing I'll say is that and I'm stealing this a little bit, one of the folks at Next Best Picture, I think, said, well, the way in which this kind of cuts for adults is not through pop culture references, which is often what we get. And I think that's sort of what Greg, you're sort of alluding to with the Aladdin comp. But it's more that the emotional, like there are two emotional levels through which to experience this. And I think the thing to make sure we say before we go into spoiler mode is that this movie, a big theme of this movie is parenting. So I think a lot of people who are sort of taken aback by the movie and surprised by it don't see that coming. And they're kind of like, wow, I didn't expect this to really resonate with me as a parent. So does that make it more or less for people who aren't parents? I think, I can definitely see the argument for why, like, that maybe that would be more difficult to relate to. But then I think, like, there's a character in here that's the child, right? And I think if you can't relate to the parenting themes in here, if you're not relating to those, I think you can definitely still relate to the other end of that relationship, right? And think about you and your parents and maybe how you were a rebellious teenager to them. Or if you just like animals, honestly, they're great. Or Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal fans, go watch this movie. You will not be disappointed. He's so charming as a fox. It's like the second I heard that, I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. But the voice performance itself is actually quite good. And Lupita Nyong'o, also, we should say before we go into spoiler mode, if you have enjoyed her at all in anything, her voice performance in this is incredible. I do not buy the, like, this should be in Best Picture narrative necessarily. I do buy the, like, if only we could nominate Best Actresses for voice performances, because I would absolutely want her to be nominated here. All right. So I think we're ready for spoiler mode. If you have not seen The Wild Robot and do not wish it spoiled, go watch it. It's in theaters. And come back and join us for the rest of the conversation. So maybe I was the one who had the most emotional experience out of all of us watching this, but I wanted to ask, were there specific places in this movie that kind of got to you emotionally, or which moment did that the most? Or
The
you all
moment
have
when
hearts of stone?
No, not me. I think the moment when Roz realizes that she has to let go of Bright Bill. I mean, my kids are far from leaving the nest, but like the thought of that, it makes me very sad. And I think that's where it sneaks up on you, right? Like you don't anticipate this story with this robot so that had some resonance for me. How about the rest of you?
For me, it was a lot of the things around Longneck, which is the Canada Goose, excuse me, who's voiced by Bill Nye, who I mean, maybe it was the soothing tones of Bill
He
Nye's
was really good.
voice. He was really
Always
good, but
good.
just sort of he comes in as this sort of like wisdom and like the real moment, and I guess it's similar, a similar moment because it was that leaving the nest thing, but like when he's like, oh, like peel off out of formation so we can do a swing by with Bright Bill so he can say goodbye one more time to his mom before we all go. Which I also was like, well, I guess this is the end of the movie. And then I was like, why is this? Why is the scene from the trailer that was so prominent in the trailer? Why did they show the last like 5 minutes of the movie, not realizing there was like I wasn't keeping track of the watch.
That was just the end of the second act.
That is the
Yeah.
end of the second act, and there's a solid 40 minutes left, which was great. I liked that 40 minutes. So, but that's the moment that I remember being like, this finally really got me.
as the president of the Long Take Review book club, I had also read this book. So what had stuck out in my mind is I knew the Bright Bill and Roz stuff, and I'm like, well, that's gonna just play for gangbusters. That is really powerful stuff. So I will say more what it made me emotional and snuck up on me was the Fox and Roz and that friendship and those moments. I as I remember the book, and Jen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, being the only other member of the Long Take Review book club, is that it like the fox got a promotion. Like he is very much one of the animals that's around in the book, and here he's really the second lead. And as you said in the recommendation algorithm, Pedro Pascal is really good. And I would give him credit. I don't think it's a register we've quite enjoyed him in enough. It's not the I'm very serious guy that he plays in genre TV. And it is not the completely loopy goofball he played in the Nick Cage movie, which is awesome if people haven't seen that. But it's somewhere in between that's like, solid guy, yeah, a little scheming and so on. But I think there's a rich tradition of animated foxes that my generation has been in love with, right? The Robin Hood from Disney. Women want to be with him, men want to be him, all the way through. And so I thought this tapped into that really well, and those kind of emotional moments where the fox kind of showed his warm, soft underbelly and admitted he needed people and that he was lonely. I thought that was what worked for me really well.
Can I make a confession that I think is going to make definitely Jen and probably Greg really mad? I didn't remember, besides Lupita Nyong'o and Mark Hamill, I did not remember who was in the cast on this. And the fox showed up and started talking, and I was like, oh, it's Ben Schwartz. That's cool. And I spent the whole movie thinking it was Ben Schwartz. And when the credits came up, I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense than why Ben Schwartz got such a big role in this star-studded movie. No disrespect to Ben Schwartz.
In your defense, though, I am judging you for saying that. In your defense, more than one critic noted they knew that it was Pedro Pascal, but they were like, why is Pedro Pascal doing Jason Bateman from Zootopia?
Another fox.
Yes, exactly. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that was Jason Bateman plays a fox in Zootopia, though he's a handsome man as well. So I would also say you just admitted you haven't watched the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, but I do think the Ben Schwartz Sonic voice is very close to the Fox voice. So Sonic 1 and 2, 3 is on its way, so catch up now.
3 looks pretty bad according to the trailer I saw. So, but people love the Sonic movies.
Better or worse than Detective Pikachu?
I think I would want to go see Detective Pikachu because that looked like
it actually was not bad.
Bonkers,
it was pretty
good.
Fun.
Yeah,
I saw the TV Glow.
Oh,
that was before he became famous.
Oh, it's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would watch the Sonic movies. I'd probably have a good time. I mean, I still have a soft spot for Jim Carrey, so I feel like that would be fun. But yes, I did forget that Ben Schwartz voiced the now toothless Sonic, or the differently teethed Sonic, which is mostly what I think of when I think of those movies, is them changing the design after the horror that was expressed by people when the first trailer came out.
I'll piggyback off all the Fox talk, because while those big moments with Roz and Bright Bill absolutely had huge emotional impact for me, the thing that ambushed me emotionally was when Fink the Fox says, but what if I need to talk to you? Like, what if I have something to tell you and you're not going to be here? The way that Pedro Pascal delivers that line destroyed me. I was just like, I was so upset. This movie that has many emotional moments, I think, was why I wanted to ask this question, because I was curious to see kind of how they ranked for everybody. I don't know how to segue to this, but I think for a lot of critics, now that I've heard lots of people's reactions to this movie, they were wowed by the emotion and kind of like how so many times I heard like, I never expected a movie about a robot adopting a gosling would really affect me so much, right? Like, so that's a testament to the storytelling for sure. But I think then people started to drop off a little bit about the third act, which they kind of called, like, they compared to Marvel movies, which I was like, that's a little ungenerous. that's like, well, it goes into this big action scene and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit with the rest of the movie. Everyone's shaking their head. So I assume that you also agree with me that this is like not a great take.
I would say the only part that really didn't work for me is I didn't like going to the city. I thought we should just let Bright Bill go have his adventure and let him come back, and he could tell the story of losing Long Neck. I think that is an emotional moment that is needed. But I thought that made me start to think too much about the rest of the world. And this movie worked best for me when it's like this beautiful little allegorical island of all of this closed ecosystem that they have to learn to get along, and they need a truce so they can all survive the cold. Like, I thought those were the best moments. And when it's like, oh, so there are humans and they live in future cities run by robots, or are there humans? Is it just the robots that are left? Like, it just kind of all opened it up too much. Jen, I have not gone on in the books. I don't know if you have. So I don't know if like these societies might be planted for future parts, but those were the parts I would trim out. I would keep the battle on the island because I thought that was fun.
Yeah,
Just the
I'm about halfway through the second book. So with my kids, they kind of they were way into aspects of it, and then there's something, I can't spoil it, but like something happens in the story, and then they were like, "We're out, we're scared." Um, so we've been taking a break from it. So I don't know how it ends, but the short answer to your question is yes. And actually, I would say that to me, that scene is absolutely necessary because it provides a counterpoint for Roz. And like for us as the audience and for Bright Bill, like we see how much Roz has grown because we meet her clones essentially who have not gone through this experience that she has and have not has the machine learning hasn't happened yet, right? And so to see Bright Bill's reaction to someone who looks exactly like his mom, but is very much not his mom, I think is an important moment for his character development. But could they have saved that for a future movie? Maybe.
it did feel a little bit like it was there to help set up a sequel. Well, I guess what I should say is that the sequence where they get to the city and they have to like fly into the whatever farming enclosure, and then there's they're labeled an infestation and are trying to be broomed out with lasers. That is that's setting up. They need that so we can have the last scene, which
Mhm.
is Roz being back in that area, because otherwise it would be really weird if that's the first time you see it is in the last like 2 minutes. But yeah, it did feel a little bit like that scene was there to set up that there's going to be another story, which is we got to get Roz out and bring her back. So yeah, I mean, I think that was like I was intrigued to see more of the world, but like I think that what Greg is saying is true. Is there's a streamlined version that maybe cuts that part out, and then I don't know if that would make the sort of big the robots arrive and the robots start causing destruction to get to the retrieval process, and then there's a fire, and then there's all this stuff that's unfolding. If that feels more earned or less earned because we haven't had this little mini laser based action sequence like 15 or 20 minutes before.
It's a fair point. All right, so I think we should move on to the rhetorical situation, a segment in which we look at a film through the lens of our academic experience. So all four of our regular co-hosts are writing professors, and we like to have this section of the episode dedicated to making connections to our experience as scholars and teachers. In the teaching of writing, the rhetorical situation refers to any contextual factors that influence composing and interpretation. For me, the big contextual factor here is kind of current discourse about AI and robots and technology, right? And so I'm kind of torn about how much this movie actually engages with that directly or even indirectly. So what are your thoughts about that? Like, does the way we watch this movie change because of current developments in artificial intelligence?
So my observation actually goes sort of the opposite way, in that I think that the movie makes observations about AI that makes me rethink like humanity and like I think the smartest idea of the movie for me was that our instincts as animals are our programming. And just as AI can be reprogrammed, so can we. And so the scene where you have all these animals who are like all represent like rungs on the ladder of the food chain, all living together to survive together, I found interesting, right? And so that's part of like why I like the film. I alluded to it earlier about how like for me, stories about AI end badly. It's Battlestar Galactica, which I know PT also loves,
They have a
right?
plan.
They didn't have a plan. Uh, it was a bad plan. But so it was really nice to just have a different take on like the possibilities of what this could mean. What about the rest of you?
I also felt the same way, and I think for me, one of the things I found so funny about this movie, which actually maybe don't feel this way about the book, like is the humor surrounding death and like how cavalier it is about the casualties of nature. Um, to a point where I was like, "Oh, should I have taken my kids to see this?" But they also thought it was funny, so I guess it's okay. Um, but I feel like the the coldness and the harshness of nature and kind of the pecking order of all these animals and this ecosystem kind of recast light onto the coldness and the harshness and the kind of lack of emotion that we often associate with AI or with technology, right? And so the fact that this movie is kind of putting those two things next to each other, and instead of contrasting them in a pretty easy way and kind of like a low hanging fruit way, like actually invites you to think about their similarities, I also thought was like, wow, like, okay, that's really interesting. But then I was like, but then what are we supposed to do with that kind of? And that's where then that's where I hit the wall in terms of like, well, is this movie actually trying to say anything about technology, or is it really just a story about parenting and family and how kindness is a survival tactic, right? That tagline gets used a bunch in the movie and kind of in the marketing materials. And I know the director in interviews has used that as like his forward pitch of like, that's really what we were going for. That was the theme. To them, that's the thesis of the movie, is that kindness is actually a survival strategy, and whereas like we wouldn't have thought so. Um, so I'm like, is it really just that, and it happens to have robots in it? You know?
I think I need to go back and amend my earlier like the when they're all in the hut by the fire during the bad winter storm,
Oh
and they
yeah,
build up to that like kindness holds us together. And basically, it's like we're all different, and we may not trust each other, we may not really know each other, but like we can survive because we're all like we can just show kindness to each other. That's probably what I got the most emotional, because I was like, we're doomed in society. We can't, these animals know this. Why don't we know this? And so, any message that focuses on kindness or empathy is maybe is low hanging fruit, but it will work for me every time.
right. That's not to
Um,
say I'm against it.
right? No, no,
I
no,
was
no.
I
Of
actually
course. But what all that was what I meant to say is that I like what you're saying, and I hadn't thought of this until both of you were sort of talking through the this dynamic. But for a movie that like there's maybe like a handful of seconds that there are humans on screen in the ads for the robot that they are able to project on the wall from the other part of the shipwreck, and then when we get the little glimpse of the big city, it feels like, in terms of what is it doing with this sort of contrast of the sort of cold realities of nature and the cycle of life and death out in the natural world, and the sort of cold, unfeeling programming of a robot, is what they find in between is they're trying to find humanity. And so, the robots are very anthropomorphized. I'm sorry, the animals are very anthropomorphized to sort of be like, they're chit-chatting and they're hanging out. They've got little feuds and all that, in a way that, like, obviously that's just like an animated movie about animals. Like, that's what happens. But it seems like that higher purpose is this sort of, what about if they were, humanity had civilizations that work together in societies that work together like this? And I do. I mean, again, maybe that's really obvious, and is that different from what if we told Robin Hood, but they were all animals? Like that, it's just sort of like taking a human story and putting it in an animal plus one robot context. But I do think that is part of why it works, and maybe why people are reacting to it in a surprised way, that like I do kind of feel like critics, like you can't imagine a movie about animals and a robot can move you, and like it's obviously about like a parent-child relationship. That's a surprise to you, but that like there's so much humanity in the story and in the dynamic that that's what's kind of getting through people's cynical shells.
I was thinking about I couldn't find it to quote it directly, but I've seen a few versions of this where there are tweets or threads or whatever people do that say essentially, actually, I was hoping the robot could like do my bills and my housework so that I could go write a screenplay and create great art, not the
Right.
opposite. And I do feel like this film is not immediately concerned with that, but it is a kind of reminder in some ways that like the parts of us that we think are the most human are not invulnerable. Like there could be a simulacrum of a parent. And my bizarre double feature suggestion is the 2024 Blumhouse masterpiece Afraid, with the AI and Afraid capitalized, which was a terrible horror movie that came out like a month ago, and I don't think anybody's talked about it in at least a month. The kind of the core of that is, it's like an Amazon home assistant that takes over the house and so on. And like the parents immediately start to cede territory to it. And so it becomes this other version of parenthood, which is like, yeah, it's great that Alexa can read your kids a story, but is that really what you want to do with your time, is to let her go read the story and parent the kids? And so I think it would be it'd be a terrible night to watch the two together just because you're watching the other one. But I guess it's like with the family and then the kids go to bed and the parents watch this. But both are kind of interested in this idea of, as PT was saying, what is it that makes us human, and what if that slips away, right? And because the humans aren't present, I think we all can look at the lovable robot, right? Like my kids were like, we need to find an action figure of that robot yesterday. And I agree. Like I want that too. But I think it's a reminder that like there is no guarantee that, what makes us human survives. And so I think it is a really interesting turn on that, even if it's not the primary concern.
I like it. The other thing that you made me think of as you were talking is the whole part where Bright Bill tries to ingratiate himself with the other geese. I really actually liked how, plot wise, he is different than they are because he's been raised by a robot. And it's kind of, part of that, they play it for humor, right? Where he starts talking like Roz, and all the other geese are like, who are you? Like, who's this guy? But I do feel like it's really interesting if you think about it in the context of the themes, because he is basically like the weird kid at school, right? And no one wants to socialize with him, which is a very relatable human experience, right? But the fact that he is that way. So there's, again, it's an interesting parallel between, it's like humanizing things or recasting something that we would associate with technology, right? This idea of being robotic and kind of like not able to socialize with humans in the same way, but it's recast as a very human thing. Yes, the plot of this movie, I'd say, yes, I will concede it's very simple, and there's kind of a ceiling to how much it can do. Like it's because the Best Picture conversation, I'm just like, if Boy and the Heron couldn't make it into Best Picture, why should this? You know what I mean?
Play the song, Jen. Play the song. Play the song.
Wait, what song?
Oscars Watch.
Oh, there we go. That was a segue. I wasn't even trying to segue. No, yeah, I accidentally set up my own segue. But what do we think about the Oscar prospects of this movie? It seems like we're all kind of like down on the Best Picture thing, but like, is it the current frontrunner in animated feature?
I don't think so.
Really?
Wait, what's ahead of it? Inside Out 2?
I think Inside Out 2, and there's that movie, is it Flow? It's like potentially going to be an international nominee and also an animated nominee. Like that feels like potentially, if that gets in, that could garner some of that like crossover in that same way where like if the movie that gets nominated in for Best Picture or Best Director that is also in international, it's like, well, that's pretty good for international because it kind of buoys it. Like, could it be a similar, like, well, it's probably not going to win Best International, but like, we'll give it Best Animated. So, I mean, it certainly, I feel like, is in the conversation. I would assume it would be nominated. For those of you not in our mini league who took it in Vulture's movie fantasy league, like, you should get points for a best animated film nomination. But I wouldn't think it's the front runner. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes it. Like, it's really nice. It's like it's a great movie that I think people respond to strongly. I don't know how much I don't know if it's a backlash, but how much the reaction to the feeling that it changes too much in the third act. Like, that didn't even cross my mind when I was watching it. But if that narrative takes hold, then maybe it wouldn't win. But I think it could. I don't immediately see it as the front runner, but maybe that's because I missed the initial hype wave that brought it up really high that made it seem that way for that category.
For those of you who don't know, Flow is a Latvian animated film, but it's about a cat that survives a flood. The cat looks very cute. I just Googled it.
That's actually the tagline of the poster. The cat looks cute.
And the animation looks really pretty. So maybe. Yeah. And with a more international expanded academy, that it makes, I like what you're saying. Makes sense. The Oscar pundit in me is like, yes, tell me more.
I mean, The Boy and the Heron won last year over Spider-Verse. So
true. Very true. Very true. So, okay. But I wouldn't put Inside Out 2 ahead of Wild Robot.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd safely say this is the front runner of what's widely available now. I think sequel kind of stigma on Inside Out 2. I don't know. Inside Out 2 finally hit Disney Plus last week, and I haven't seen like renewed conversation around it. I mean, that could be everybody saw it in June, right? But I do think that there's a chance that it gets a little forgotten as we get further from it. I guess what seems most threatening, my read on the animation category is they will nominate all the mainstream stuff and then find the most artistic, it's not mainstream movie to win, right? Like, they just seem to not actually like all the Pixar and the Disney. I believe, isn't it correct that there's a final quote unquote Wallace and Gromit movie coming out this year still, which would have Netflix money behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could be, Wallace has been in the industry for a long time. He's well respected. It could be one of those career Oscars for Wallace, which would just really light up the awards season. So I think it's there.
There's also Memoir of a Snail is the other stop motion contender, but that's very mature content and not for kids. So I'm not sure if that increases or decreases its chances. It definitely makes it artsier, so it could take the artsy movie spot. But Marcel the Shell with Shoes On spot.
So I'm looking at the variety. Not that they're always perfectly on point or anything, but the variety predicted nominees as of right now are exactly the ones we were just talking about. Wild Robot is ranked number one as the most likely. Then Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Flow, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul.
Oh, I'm there.
And that foul is of course spelled like poultry. And then the next in line afterwards is Piece by Piece, which is the Lego Pharrell movie. Transformers 1, Ultraman Rising, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, which I've never heard of. And then, of course, the real come from behind winner, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, which will benefit both me and Antonio when that just takes everyone by storm.
Yeah. Gold Derby has the same top 5. Wild Robot, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Flow, Wallace and Gromit. So, go us. we're good at predicting.
But probably nothing else. Like, no best adapted screenplay and no best picture for Wild Robot.
The score has an outside chance, I would say.
Okay.
Score's pretty good.
Score was strong.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's this fight is just happening in animated feature. I don't think it's really exceeding that.
Wither Gru. Nobody thinks Despicable Me 4 is going there. Gru and Optimus Prime are sitting at the bar down the street, not getting into the ceremony. surprising considering how popular that franchise is. I am not making that argument on the quality of said film, but I'm sure a lot of us have had to watch many of those movies. So,
Well, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And I feel like watch there be an animated movie that none of us knows about that's supposed to come out before the end of the year that will suddenly blindside this entire slate.
It's the Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. We already
No,
know.
but we
it's
know
coming,
about
Jen.
that.
That's
PT.
coming.
I said once we
Robot
don't know
Dreams 2, the dog loves the robot even harder, right? Like that was the one last year. So
The Oscars call for aid, and Rohan will answer.
We'll answer. Okay, but will they answer in anime? Will that would probably be the first movie to ever be like first true and not Miyazaki, not Ghibli anime movie. All right. Well, thank you all for indulging me because I'm the one who was like, but what about Wild Robot? We have to talk about Wild Robot. So I appreciate you indulging me. Antonio, where can folks find you? And I know there's only one place.
Find me on Letterboxd at A Elefano, AELEF as in Frank, ANO. Greg, where can people find you?
Nowhere, because I'm not going to use my plugs for that. I would like to use my plug today to say one member on this call, and I bet all of our listeners know who it is, puts in a ton of work on our podcast and on posting them and editing them. And we would love it if you could, dear listeners, please spread the word about our podcast. We don't ask this a lot. We don't care about the likes and subscribes, but Jen is putting in so much work to wrangle the other members of this crew, to edit the shows and to promote them. Yes, we all chip in a little around the edges, but this is Jen's show that we're all just squatting in. So if you could, instead of following me on social media, please just tell some friends, do a social media post, recommend this podcast to somebody, especially as we head into award season. It would be great to boost our downloads just a little bit. And PT, where can people find information about said podcast?
Well, I mean, they could subscribe to it as you very wisely recommend wherever they're listening to it right now, and they could, they could subscribe. They could leave a rating. They could leave a review. That helps get people. It bumps us up in the algorithm. It gets us more out in the world into other people's recommendations. So please, you can do that. You can also follow us on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review, and you can follow us on Letterboxd at LTR Pod. Or if you want to communicate with us, if you're like, I've done all of that, I've done all that I can, but I want to send something positive to the host, but especially, as Greg says correctly, especially to Jen, who I think probably does like 92% of the work, and we do like whatever 8 divided by 3 is. That was terrible math. To clean up the around the edges. You can email us. Our email address is thelongtakereview@gmail.com, and that message will get passed right along to Jen's desk. Jen, now that everyone said nice things about you,
I know.
Where can they find you? Because they shouldn't pay attention to the show, but just follow you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. The three of you are my Fink the Fox to my Roz. I really appreciate that. And I think you're devout. You all show up and make me look good, right? Like that's why you're here. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Threads at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, and on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen. Task complete.
Meet Matt Luke.
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive new podcast episodes as well as written reviews of films with Oscar buzz and new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.